like to call back into session the Monday, August 20th, 2018 South Burlington City Council meeting. And we will move on to agenda item 4, which is the agenda review. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in order of the agenda items? Okay, seeing none. We'll now take comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. And I'm assuming we have some people who would like to speak. So who is going to go first? Who would like to? Yes, please. Will you come up to that table, sit behind the mic, tell us your name, and then your comments, please.
My name is Eleanor Miller. I moved to Vermont 12 years ago to be the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at UVM, and I'm now a professor of sociology. My specialty is urban sociology and the impact of developing cities on the culture and quality of life of the people who live in cities. And my comment is that as a resident of South Burlington, sort of watching the development that's being proposed, I am not assured, convinced at all that the city has taken into account the ways in which the development will impact the people in the various neighborhoods in the city. And that concerns me greatly.
Can I just ask you, just to further clarify, is it the development of housing or commercial or both?
I would say I'm at this point focused on the development of housing, but that's not separate from the development of commercial spaces.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to go next? Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Darylyn Peters. I live in South Burlington, and this is the first time I've been before this august body. And it's just a question. And that is, as I see all the development in South Burlington, my question is, do you all know, and can you share with just citizens what this looks like? That is, what is the whole plan? How much development is in what stage? How much has been approved and forthcoming? So we know how many units, housing units, are coming on down the line in 5 years or 10 years or whatever. And what is sort of, I don't know if the correct term is outbuilding, or what is it that where you say, well, we know that there are going to be this many more housing units. So we anticipate this increase in population in the schools, in the need for school buses and school drivers, for police, for fire, for road maintenance, for water, etc. I just wonder if you do those kinds of projections so that you're always looking before more things are approved. You say kind of, this is where we are for year 5, year 6, year 8, year 10. Do we know that? Is there a way that that's monitored? I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying I don't know that. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you do that sort of thing.
Well, we do some, but I don't think there's a place that anyone can go to on the web, for example. Pardon me?
Yeah,
we have a comprehensive plan.
Oh, I've read the comprehensive plan, but that's just, that's aspirational.
Right.
That's not, where are we? Now, what have we approved? And what's somewhere in the line of being approved? You know, it hasn't been approved yet, but there's been the sketch or the plat or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's, my question is, if you charted it, like, you know, planners, we chart these kinds of things, right? I mean, my area is public health, and we chart this sort of stuff all the time. But I just wonder, do we do that?
Well, probably not to the extent that you would like, and many of us on the council would like.
Yeah, because this all has tremendous budgetary
Yes, it
impacts and tax as well, right? So, I mean, all of that fits in. Anyway, I would exhort that there be a little more of that and that it be shared with the citizens. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'm not familiar with how the Development Review Board manages currently working projects. Is there a queue that besides the posted agendas, is there a list of things that are in current, which the former chair of the Development Review Board is on the council here, so I keep looking at Tim, but how could residents get an idea of all of the projects that are currently in the works?
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
From my time on the DRB, we were sort of an in-basket driven quasi-judicial, I was on it, right? But I think that's how they operate, and they're fed by planning and zoning. So if developers have an inkling about what they want to do, they make contact with P&Z, they sit down with staff, they look at some raw sketches, and when they reach the threshold where they think they might have a viable plan, and sometimes it doesn't work out like that, sometimes they just go ahead and present the plan, they submit an application. And that sketch plan application goes before the review board, the Development Review Board.
No, I'm familiar
And
with that.
that's the first time the pipeline is entered and the public can really see it because it's always on all the agendas that are posted on the city website, right? And then you can go into the meetings if you want. It goes from sketch to preliminary to final plat, right? And sometimes they combine preliminary and final
No,
at
but
the same
I
time.
wasn't asking about that process. I was asking about, do you always have before you what
Right, the
has
running
been
total or
approved?
something, yeah.
So you can say in 5 years, in 10 years, et cetera, we're gonna have this number of units,
But-
and we're gonna need this level of schools and roads and blah, 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 staff,
You
police.
can go back, and this is not the way to present this if you wanted a useful log of what's happened, but you can go back through every single agenda for every DRB meeting and find out what has been approved. And you will see the packages and you will see the layouts with the streets and the homes and how many units and all that stuff if you want to. If you wanted to create a historic log and go from point Z back and come to the present and say, well, what has been approved that hasn't been built yet?
Yep.
I mean, I can tell you right now what I think I know has been approved and hasn't been built yet, right? And there's a fair amount of it. You can see some of it happening right now.
But that has budget implications, so you want
Of
to
course
be
it does,
looking
and
at that.
I think there are impact fees that are used to help to make the investments from the developers to try and offset some of those budgetary concerns that you're gonna, not concerns, but those budgetary impacts you're gonna have in the future.
Yeah, but do you know right now, like how many housing units have been approved and are in the process of being built?
If Mr. Connor were here, he could give us an exact number, probably pretty quickly off the back of his hand, right? But, and I don't know if we want to get into this tonight, but it just, if you look at Cider Mill 2,
Without
there's, I mean,
correct information, we shouldn't.
I'm just gonna say that
necessarily have a dialogue.
the biggest housing developments are Cider Mill 2
And Southfield.
and Bryan Hillside Farm,
Bryan,
right?
Southfield.
And if you look, City Center is undergoing transformation right now on Market Street, and Garden Street will go in probably not too far in the future, right? So there will be some 4 to 5 story buildings on those 2 streets, as we have planned since 1980, right? As Jim Kondo said, when they first had a vision for transforming that area into a high-density urban area. So those are the biggest ones that you know of, and you can see that there are still some places that haven't been filled out. Cider Mill 1 is not fully filled out yet, right? Sadie Lane is getting close, but is not filled out. Goldberg's down by is Autumn Hill Road, I don't know if they're done yet, right? And there also is the Bartlett Weaver construction across in front of the Lang's front yard. I don't think that's quite done yet, but those are smaller sites with 9 or fewer houses where they're up at house 6, 7, or 8, things like that.
I think I just heard Councilor Kaufman make a suggestion that I would fully endorse. Paul Connor is fabulous with visuals, and if he could, could consider in a future meeting to visualize this.
I think maybe folks would like, and we've been here over 40 years, and it's hard to keep track. And so I certainly understand what you folks are saying. Maybe Paul could put together, probably not for the next meeting, but give him a month or so, because there's a lot on his plate. He's fabulous. And maybe you can put together a presentation. Here's what we've done, here's what's in the hopper right now, here's what the future looks like, and folks can ask questions, and it'll give everybody just here's where we're at.
And what the burden will be of adding all of that.
Yeah, and you know, the
Well,
burden.
we do ask those questions, and Paul will answer them. I mean, we certainly have asked, so when do we need another policeman or another fireman?
Or another
It's-
fire truck,
or
or
another
something
school.
like that.
Right. The hard part, I think, is it's drips and drabs, you know, when it's 9 units, doesn't really impact the traffic. Well, you get 85 9-unit developments, and you do have an impact on traffic. And so it's very hard to, I think, predict well. I mean, because it's so incremental.
Got a question back here.
But yes,
I
Wes?
was going to suggest an easy way of doing this, and I think it accomplishes its purpose, is the same thing we do with our taxes. We have a spreadsheet that anybody can access anywhere. You can put on, here's the development, and all we need to know, all we're looking for, I think is all you're looking for, is how many units have been approved. And you can do it from day one of this year and start a spreadsheet, and every year you can have a different spreadsheet and just keep, and that way we can go look at it, to go back and look at all the minutes and all, I mean, I'd be confused, I'd be baffled.
Yeah,
I don't know how the committees do it at times.
and also get it in the other paper.
Well,
If they can
even
get
that, but
that local-
just a spreadsheet on the web somewhere for the zoning.
We could certainly start with having Paul Connor come in and give us an update. And in that conversation, I also hope that we might be able to identify what are the elements that we want you to keep track of that have a financial impact that may not be fully realized with the impact fees. I mean, we certainly have Parks and Rec impact, we have police, we have fire.
For the offices,
Oh, the
we
what?
have
Schools.
property taxes that,
Roads.
as a result of it too, so.
Yeah, that's important.
Right, that's
Well, in theory, is bringing in money as well as costing money, and you gotta try and keep it in the, you know, in the black, so to speak, that more is gonna be coming in than it's costing us going down the road. I think,
Yeah,
but
I think it would be worthy of a discussion. There is a point where the black goes to red.
Right, I
So,
know.
and I think that the fire chief and the director of public works have both come in and expressed some concerns that we're reaching a point here. And I think that makes sense to have some real discussion.
And then maybe there's a way, you know, if it's not being done, there's probably a way it can be documented on a regular basis. Anybody can go look anytime, and maybe we're not doing that, I don't know.
Well, we're not the only city facing this, so
Yeah.
I'm sure there are pre-developed programs.
Probably
You can
so.
Just fill it in, I don't know, but, yes, you may.
Of one of the speakers, it's an unusual meeting where a large group of people come in and talk to the council about a particular issue. To clarify, so I can work with Paul on getting meaningful information for everybody, is this just a group of people who've come in to talk about citywide growth? Or is it a group of people who've come in to talk about a particular development? Is there something that prompted it? Is it city center? Is it?
Yeah,
One at a time.
We really can only listen.
Sorry, Ellen.
I think
No, I'm
that's a
trying
great
to-
That's a very
question.
good question.
Would you like to try to answer that for the group, I guess, or at least from your perspective?
But I can give you some observations. First, I want to thank you all for your service, especially for Tom Chittenden, who has been very helpful in providing some background information, very responsive.
And your name?
Albert Gross, here 14 years from Connecticut. Everyone's trying to sell in Connecticut. Hopefully, they'll be able to. But we've been very pleased with South Burlington. We follow a lot of news Vermont was ranked #1 state to live in by CNBC. South Burlington was ranked #2 for safety, thanks to our very fine police force. Those are things that are very motivational. What has been troubling to me as of late is that the original neighborhoods that we are near Vermont National in one of those communities that were built now by Mr. McDonald. And what's seeming to us is that the nature of the neighborhood is changing. I'm an economist by background, worked in New York for 40 years on Wall Street. What's troubling to me is that the nature of this growth is fine, but the nature for our neighborhood is changing dramatically. From the proposal that, as we've seen, and one of our neighbors asked for a date when it's supposed to start, I said I would try to get it. But the intensity and the density of the development that we've seen on the plan dramatically changes the nature of what we've seen around Dorset, Nolan Farm, and around Vermont National. It will change, it potentially threatens the values of existing properties because the density is far greater in terms of the number of homes in a certain area, in a certain acreage. So that there is a risk to existing homeowners, which we should not experience. Homes are great, but when you change the fundamental nature, and I think what we're talking about is off of Nolan Farm, it's called Dorset Meadows, that is very, the plans as stated is very disturbing in terms of the nature of housing versus of proposed housing versus existing housing, and to the quality of life. We now have a nice smooth flow of traffic, a stop sign. With that kind of development, we're back to having street lights and changing the whole tenor of what we've been used to in that neighborhood.
Okay.
So it is a concern in terms of growth is fine, but the quality of development seems to be to maximize the profit of the developer and not considering the other interest, namely the existing homeowners.
So the quality you equate to density, is that
In
in part anyway?
In part, yes. It's very different than if you look at the homes that are now on Nolan Farm, that are on Four Sisters, that are in Vale, and that are on Golf Course and Holden.
Certainly, okay. So would it be fair to say then a lot of, well, let me ask, are the people who are here tonight concerned about this type of development in the southeast quadrant?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So, add on to that, how did you happen to get together and all come in this evening?
We didn't. We're individually motivated.
I don't know this. I'm sorry, really? We all.
I'm not planning to run for elected office. I don't know any of these people.
Yeah.
So are you all in the Nolan Farm area? And so am I.
Just raise your hand, like, yes.
I think to myself, just, because I have to pull out from Deerfield to Spear every day to go out. And I'm thinking, that development goes, and they're gonna have to put a light in here real fast, because it's getting harder and harder now. Wait another week when 10,000 more cars are in town.
I think you're right, sir, and it'll bring back the memories of Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York, which is the reason
I
we
don't think we're
left there.
planning to do that, and I think it's a really good idea that we're gonna look at. No, speaking for myself, I'm not planning to do that. So I think it'd be really helpful when Paul comes in and puts together a presentation.
Okay.
And then you can ask a lot of questions, and,
But I think the point is, growth has to happen. You want growth. but it's also the nature and the quality of that growth
Sure.
that's important.
So let me just clarify, this then is not about concerns around the development, the planned development in city center?
No.
Because that is very dense.
No, we all know
Okay,
that.
so that, okay. Just wanted to make that clear, because when you talk about development, if that's the development you want, thank you, and we don't have to redo that, and we can focus on the conversation with Paul. Although that development certainly impacts sewer capacity, all sorts of things. I mean, that has its own
Let me just put a
impact.
plug in for the other paper right now. So that's our
Yes.
community paper. It's mailed to every single one of your homes, right?
Yeah.
Read it cover to cover, because there are excellent articles about what happens in every meeting here, and the synopses are great. And if there's a special development that's being, looked at, there's usually a nice big colorful map that's on the front page or the second page. So I urge you to read your other papers every time you read. And also, you were asking about how can we know about things that are coming up or what's happened. You get a natural log if you read that, right? The other
I
thing
think,
is-
please,
I just want to also say
Councilor Barrett has the floor.
that the Pinnacle Homeowners Association is party to a suit to try and prevent Spear Meadows from being built at a certain density that was proposed by the developer, which, and that proposal changed hands once already because it was first proposed in like 2008 or 2009. The status of that is where it's sitting with a decision waiting for the Supreme Court on TDRs, all right? And so I think that if there are people here from Pinnacle, that this is another, they're turning around to the south, looking at Nolan Farm Road, seeing another disparity in the density of another proposed development. So this is sort of the same thing where there is resistance to a development of a higher density that's in the Nolan Farm and Pinnacle, areas. And that's really what it's all about. The original resistance to the Spear Meadows was about the density, and there was almost an agreement at one density level, but then it wasn't done. So I think
What
that
is the density proposed at Dorset?
well, I think that what happened was there was one proposal that went into P&Z, and they came out with a higher density because
Is it
they
an
could do
R7?
CDRs.
Is it, what is it?
They could do CDRs. But I think we need Paul here to really get into the depth of this. I don't want to
Does anyone have a date on when that is supposed
Excuse me a
to
minute.
start?
Tom,
Tied to all this, and Tim, I don't mean to put you on the spot again, besides reading the other paper, the other thing I spoke to Al earlier about today, and if you want to reflect on this from your years in the DRB, which you did a great job as chair there, a very important thing when you see something in the other paper, you hear about these developments, is attend the DRB meetings and have your voice heard. My experience with the DRB, they listen. They come here, okay, good. So keep doing that. So I just encourage you, those
I just want to.
Can I ask
I don't think we have, it is a very enthusiastic group, and I would like to invite you back where we can really have much more of a dialogue. What I want to suggest or ask you is, it sounds like it's more than seeing the plat that has gone to the DRB, because that is so far along that that's almost a done deal. Not totally, but almost. And I think what I'm hearing people say is, and I feel this way as a council member, I'd like to know a little more proactively, farther out, what's in the potential pipeline, so that before we accept that development, we have the financial impact, both positive, what is going to be generated with property taxes, and just as importantly, how is it going to affect all the other services and the costs associated with them, with the community. And then on top of that, of course, is that how we want the land developed? We have zoning, but you can change zoning.
May I, as a point of clarification, do you have the final vote on a plan for the city of South Burlington? If this
The
proposal comes.
comprehensive plan, yes, but not in my understanding. And the LDRs. But once we've passed the LDRs, they guide the development review process, and once that's sort of the law, they adhere to those, and if the development adheres to those rules, unless we want to go to court every time, you have to accept them.
Well-
So I think we're looking for or you are looking for a little more tangible evidence or information before it's kind of like, oh, there's a,
Well, the point you made, I think, is an excellent one.
The what?
That the point you made about notification, there should be much earlier notification for the general public, because I knew about it because I saw stakes in the field. That's probably kind of late in the game. But I think if you were made it that it was a large official notice that something like this was going in, I think the response would be just as equal as it is today.
Well,
as
and
people
just
have
as a
become
devil's
more
advocate, if I'm a developer and I haven't bought a piece of land, right, and it's sitting there as an agricultural use or some natural resources use, right, or whatever it is, it hasn't been purchased yet, I mean, do I have to tell you 10 years in advance that I'm thinking about buying it so I can build houses on it? I mean, at what point does it become that threshold where then the public knows? Because at this point in time, it's once the first sketch plan is made available to the DRB for its first review. But that's the first time that the DRB ever gets to see it
So
either. So,
I'm just going to interject here. The impression I get is more than notification. I think that the way that Ellie Miller started out the conversation was, and here we have Albert Gross, again putting, that point, driving it home, is that it's the nature of the changes that are occurring that is bringing these people forward. And so that's more than notification. That, to me, speaks of public dissatisfaction with their LDRs. And so I think that this is not news to any of us. We've been reading the other paper as much as anybody, as well as the Free Press. And I just think we need to also look at it that way, that it's not simply notifying the public. I hear, and have heard over many years, to be honest, compounded by things I've heard from our fire chief and our director of public works, that we need to pay careful attention to how development is being done and to how we are respecting not only our financial capacity, but also just the quality of life and the nature of landscapes that people are seeking here in South Burlington. And not only newcomers, but I think people who have been here for a long time. So that's what I hear, and what I've been hearing for weeks, and I would even say years.
and I have been on their side of the audience, right? When Farrell and Dan Morrissey proposed the Odell Apartments and the Eastwood Commons 1 and 2 and the Olympiad and the Farrell Gardens, when that took over basically an empty meadow, on the northern side of 189, the Eastwoods neighborhood was alarmed that kind of development could be proposed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened then was that we got Act 250 party status, and we went to those meetings and we challenged the developer. We worked with the developer and we obtained a few changes, not as many as we'd like, but if you travel down Farrell Street today, it's not a form-based code situation, unfortunately, because the buildings are pulled back a little bit, but the Farrell Street Odell corridor now is a fairly vital part of the city. It's very walkable, it's mixed use. People can go leave their apartments and go right to Shaw's, go to Starbucks, go to a restaurant, and stay all within that one area. So my point is that as a neighbor to an area that was basically, seemingly rural next to the interstate, if you can call it that, which had not been developed at all, we resisted a fair amount and were able to obtain a few points from the developer. And what arose from that is is not a bad situation. It's actually a very positive situation for a lot of people who need housing, especially in the Odell apartments, right? A lot of nice condos, Eastwood Common 1 and 2, and Bacon Street lofts, right? So it's a very dense urban area that I think is a positive aspect of the city. My point is that I was on that side of the audience fighting against the very thing that they're saying, where there's too much development going on, right? That's because of the blank field being turned into something, and then going through that process of realizing that there was value in what was going to be done. So I'm not saying that you think that there's going to be value in that field. I'm just saying that going from a blank field to houses is a shock. And you're in that shock right now because of the LDRs allowing what they can. So I just wanted to impress upon you that if you took a zoning map of the city right now and overlaid it on a Google map and looked for every open spot of more than 3 or 4 acres, right, and just marked it, boundaried around it, right, and tried to determine if it's not wet, it's not wetlands, that there's probably somebody looking at that land long-term to think about developing it. Just so you know. I mean,
Well, no, but we're not just talking about Dorset.
So
We're talking about O'Brien. Have you driven by what's going on?
I drive by it every day.
It's astounding. You're
I-
like
I
wiping out
you know,
the trees.
so I'd
You're
love to
wiping out the land.
I'd
You're
love to
raising
sit-
the place.
I'd love to
don't
sit
think
and discuss it with
this-
you, but I don't think this is the right forum today because.
What's the right
You'll have a-
Well, wait a minute.
She said she wants to have Paul Connor here because he's the expert in all this, so.
And then I would like to, at that meeting, maybe we can have it as a public hearing, have him present and provide a good amount of time for public response and input. We're not in a position tonight to change anything. So I appreciate your passion and interest, and I thank you for coming out. I would like to set up a better forum to hear your concerns, have the people who work for the city government who are in charge of this help us understand the rules and regulations and their interpretation of our citywide comp plan, and see where we need to make changes potentially, or what's gone awry. The comp plan is good for 5 years, but that doesn't mean you can't amend it. The LDRs are a rolling process to conform with or try to translate our vision for the city and the comp plan into rules that, one, allow for things to happen or building to happen that we want, to keep us out of court, so every development isn't litigated because the rules are not clear. We don't want a city, at least I don't want to spend that kind of money because we haven't had the rules and regulations developed thoughtfully and comply or reflect with what the city would like. So I'll let 2 more people speak because you've been patient, I had your hand up. But then I'm going to stop this and invite you back. And maybe in the interim, it would be helpful if you have specific questions that you could send them to us and we could get that as part of the agenda and really have the conversation that you would like. So the gal with the pretty shirt on, and then Sandy.
So I would just like, to respond to what Tim said about Dorset, whatever it's called over there. I mean, I don't live there, but I ride my bike over there. Oh, my name is Denise Holsky.
Pardon me?
My name is Denise Holsky. And the way I understand it is that the builder went in and offered to have fewer houses and set back from the road. I ride my bike past there every single day. Well, not every
And
single
which
day.
development is this again?
I live in Cider Mill, but I ride my bike over there
Over to where?
on Nolan Farm.
Nolan Farm. Oh, okay.
Okay, so I would like to respond to that. So one of my questions is, who is the city? Because the city insisted that they change the plan over there to include more density and closer to the road. I don't know if you drive down Dorset Street, but it's pretty bad. I mean, the house on Link Street is so close to Dorset, I think when it's windy, that it's gonna blow right in the street. But anyway, I just feel like there's a disconnect because I have been to the DRB, I have been to the planning, and they all say the same thing, go to city council. That's why everybody's here, is because they said go to city council, that they cannot change anything. So there's a disconnect between the citizens and the council and the boards. So the DRB really is unwilling or unable. They say they're unable to change anything. And I know that citizens from all over the area do not want this amount of development. I go to a class here every Tuesday and Thursday. People live in all parts of South Burlington. No one agrees with that kind of development. So 1 year ago today, I went to the DRB, not today, but 1 year ago, I went to the DRB regarding the density equation. And they said they would look into it. So then when I returned a year later, they still hadn't looked into it because they're so busy. They're so busy approving development when the density equation is a fundamental factor in that. So why does South Burlington include wetlands in the density equation? They should not be included in that equation because that only makes more houses in one little spot. So I would like to know who is the city if it's not you or us, right? Also allowing, here's a little tract of land. They built 4 houses. It looks like the hodgepodge style. It doesn't look well planned. It's extremely unattractive. Regarding what they said, where can I get a concise list published of approved and soon to be approved projects? I read the other paper, I go to the DRB. It's really impossible to get them to change their mind once it's on that track. So we should know when some builder is buying a tract of land. That's when we need to know that, right? So given the irreversibility of your decision, and according to the DRB and the planning and zoning, it is your decision, I think there needs to be a pause in the approval of any new developments until this density equation is looked at, the impact that is looked at. And I heard in the Dorset Farms there's going to be a bridge. So they build the bridge and then we have to maintain it. My taxes have not gone down with the increase of my neighbors. And I think there needs to be a down zoning. So this is urgent at this point. It can't wait because it doesn't wait. The train wreck just keeps on going. So somebody has to put the brakes on, and I hope that it is you.
I'm Sandy Julie, and I just wanted to give a little historical perspective. I was a city councilor from 2007 to 2013. One is, and I wanted to get this on the record for people here and also on TV, that we operate within a region, the Chittenden County region, and there is a regional plan. And the regional plan endorses what it views as smart growth, and I recall the city has approved the regional plan in which 80% of the growth in the county is to take place within 20% of the land, and that would be in growth areas. And I don't know if 100% of South Burlington is a growth area, but I know a lot of South Burlington is a growth area. And a lot of that is so that people don't have to commute from, say, Heinsberg or Bristol or who knows where to get to their jobs, so that people have, it's to lower energy and all kinds of reasons. So I just want to make sure people know that it's not just South Burlington's planning, it's also the regional plan. The second thing is that the zoning in the southeast quadrant is around Cider Mill, happened before I was on the council, So it was in the early 2000s. And so you're talking about zoning that was done a fairly long time ago. Because I know I would have remembered it if it had come through, the land development regulations would have come through the council when I was on the council. And I'm not really sure, because I have to say I was very surprised when I looked and I saw that there was R7 zoning down there and that it was as broad a geographic area as it is. And I have a differing point of view from, with all due respect, Councillor Chittenden. I think, as Councillor Barrett said, pretty much is defined when you get to the DRB.
Yeah.
There's some wiggle room, but like you said, in your experience with Odell Parkway and everything, you got some changes, but not nearly what you wanted, because the rules have been set. And not that there's no flexibility at all, but the DRB has to follow the rules. I would submit that where you need to go is the Planning Commission, because that's, in my view, where the action is. I know the council is the final voice in approving the land development regulations, but you don't do the legwork. That really happens at the Planning Commission. And I have a concrete proposal, and that is, I think it would be a better investment for the residents to record and televise the Planning Commission meetings than recording and televising the DRB.
I'd like to do both, just for the record.
I mean, both is okay, but I think in terms of having citizen or residents know what the actual rules are that are being proposed for the development in the city, is something that residents need more access to. And I think having it on Channel 17 would be a positive thing. And as I said, if you wait, if somebody asked me which is more important, DRB or Planning Commission, I would say Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will plan some kind of public hearing and presentation. We can certainly discuss whether we record Planning Commission meetings. I don't disagree that that would potentially be helpful. So more members of the public sort of understand and follow the conversations that occur there.
And I mentioned that you can get on a list, and every Friday you get the agenda. I just got it last couple days to the DRB with all the attachments that you click on and you can read. And the same thing with the Planning Commission.
Right.
Just let Paul Connor know you want to be on that list. And you can keep up to date with what both is happening. Not necessarily that long list that people would like, but you can find out what's happening without doing anything. The city will
But
provide.
that's the point.
The planning,
They don't do anything, they just keep going.
I'm
They
talking
said
about the Planning Commission.
The council, they said you have to go to city council,
Well,
and you would direct
that's
them
a
to do
conversation
something else.
that we can have with the Planning Commission as well. We give them lots of projects to work on, and if we decide that this is, really a high priority, we can direct them to start working on this sooner rather than later. Because time is, you're right, things keep happening and they're in the queue, and it's really hard to stop them at this point if they've gone through the process to follow all the rules.
But you can put a pause to that, that's what they told me. We need a pause.
Well, we did that at one point, except
Well, we need
it
to do it
wasn't a
again.
full pause because the city council became the DRB. But I understand in other communities around have had interim zoning. South Burlington has had interim zoning, and so-
consider down zoning.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, and I'm sorry, we really don't have the time to hear everybody, but we hope that you will return or write us,
I
or...
don't really know about this forum or this event.
How will we know?
Yeah, how?
Well, we advertise it in the other paper, right?
I don't get the other paper every week.
How
Depends
can
on the
you
postal
not?
service. All depends on the postal service.
Well, it's on the web.
Okay. Well, you can
on the
visit the web. We try not to make it a secret. We do not send postcards to everyone in the community, but,
And we'll be looking at the next September meeting.
Or the one after, I think, because this is a project, it's gonna take a little while to put together.
well, you can start it and have the conversation and
About a
then,
month, I think,
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
so,
Sure.
Either the third
Well-
Tuesday, Monday of September or the first Monday of October. So it's either one of our meetings, about a month out.
May I put forth that one of my major concerns is the demographics. Who is coming into the state to be buying all the housing that is being developed in this area? Could we have it a part of this proposal in the forum, somebody with the facts and the figures to go over the demographics that they project to be coming in for a housing that we're putting up? We're putting up hundreds of new homes. Who is coming
I don't know
here
who
to
that
buy
is.
these homes? This is a major concern that we have coming forth. I think it is a potential glut that we could be looking
we
at.
can look into that.
And I'd love to see that being part of the forum that we're discussing, because I think it's all comprehensive. We love South Burlington. We want the growth, but we want it contained so it meets the demand coming here. But if we don't have the demand coming in, if we don't have the jobs, we can't hold young people to come here, to move here. They'd love to be here, but they don't have the employment here. If we don't have that growth and we still have a level baseline, a population here that is aging per Art Wolf, we have a problem. And I think this needs to be addressed.
Attempt to get that information.
Thank you,
We
appreciate
were
it.
just,
Thank
we were
you.
just mentioning his name as a possibility, so
Good.
yes. He's pretty darn good.
Art Wolf.
All right, so thank you very much. I'd like to move on to item 6. Okay, committee, council.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Conservative and very pro, but he has lots of facts.
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry. Okay, we're going to have to skip down to item 8, if there's no problem, because that's a public hearing. It was supposed to start at 7:30. We're running obviously a little late. This is the public hearing regarding the placement of a question on the November ballot regarding the issuance of debt, including TIF district financing, to construct a library, senior center, and city hall at 180 Market Street. Alana is not here, but per our conversation and our 2 special meetings last week, I think we, oh, okay, I'm sorry. So I entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I will move that we open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone here to comment on that proposal, the library, senior center, and city hall?
Is there any language to comment?
No. But you could have comments on the project. So, Michael, why don't you come forward?
2 words, don't skimp.
Okay, got it.
Well, I was here to find out what is the plan, because a lot of things were, in terms of waiting and having a separate ballot,
Right.
and voting in November or voting in March. A lot of things were discussed on Wednesday night, and
Correct.
I was just wondering, are you
I think.
Are you going to postpone and possibly have another public hearing?
We will, and the motion would be to continue the public hearing to September 4th. And at that point, we believe we will have the information, the cost figures and design elements completed or at a point where the council could take a vote.
So you continue the hearing.
So, yeah, so I would love to have someone make that motion.
So moved.
Continue
And
the
I'll-
public
and I'll
hearing?
have a comment that we may get to that point and decide we're not there
Mhm.
and just push it off.
I understand.
But yes, I'll move that.
Can I hear the motion again?
The motion is to
Continue
continue
hearing.
the public hearing regarding the placement of the question on the ballot to September 4th at
7:30.
7:30.
I will second that.
As long as the contingent that was here isn't here again to make it 7:30.
Well, we're going to have a special public hearing for them.
Okay.
So, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. so
There's a
that-
question.
Close the
yeah.
public
Oh, I'm
hearing.
sorry.
I was just wondering, is it possible to review the MOU between the school district and the city about the land parcel?
Didn't we post it?
It was only available to us, it wasn't available to the public packet. It's a document from our lawyers, and until it's approved, I don't know what's the answer to the question.
We'll have to look into that, whether or not it's a public document, something of public disclosure.
The MOU is already approved, so that is still available, but as far as the agreements, those are still under negotiation.
The MOU is approved?
The MOU was approved several months ago.
Yes.
So that can be reviewed at any time.
But the documents we got, sorry.
But the final definitive agreement has not been approved yet, and that's still under negotiation.
And that's not
And
available?
that is, yes, that is currently confidential as it's under negotiation.
Who are you?
Sorry, I'm the city attorney, Andrew Paul.
So, yes.
So I just want to say that for the public, following the discussion from the meeting on August 15th was hard without having the MOU, because that would have set some context for the discussion that was happening. So just wanted to share that.
I think we were public with the concepts included in the MOU, were we not?
We can look at the MOU, we can get you a copy.
The exact legal wording, we can't share with you, but we could put that, and we'll post that on the website. Because I appreciate you didn't really understand what the quibble was about. But we'll continue to work with the school board on that, and we will have that ready for September.
I
And we
thought
have
we
that
were
ready
just
for
told
September 4th?
The
Yeah.
MOU
Yep.
could
Pardon
be-
me?
I thought we were just told the MOU could be made public.
And we will.
Okay. You're going to post it on the website? Great, thank you.
Did you have some questions? No, it was just hard to follow that dialogue because you kept referring to the MOU. And it's in the MOU, but then not having the MOU to
MOU,
refer
right.
to, it was hard to follow the dialogue, that's all. And I just think it would help set the context for the people
Okay.
following the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So let's, I move we come out of the public hearing?
So moved.
Or ended? All in favor?
Aye.
And then we make the motion?
We continued.
You've already continued it.
Okay.
We did.
All right.
We're good.
I'm
To
sorry,
continue.
is there a vote on your motion about?
I believe so.
There was.
There was.
Yes, there was.
I thought the comment.
You didn't hear it? Well, we can
No.
vote again. All in favor of the motion to continue the public hearing regarding the placement of a question on the November ballot be continued to September 4th at 7:30 PM. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay. Thank you. We'll go back to item 6, a report on the community outreach program, and we have Chief Whipple and our Deputy Chief Burke. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for the invitation.
Only an hour off for that.
Yep.
I should be handing these out right now. You want to like help me? Or
Yes.
Grab a second. We're going to hand you 3 documents here. How are you?
Yeah, I like your patch.
Thanks.
Looks good.
It says south on it, doesn't it?
It does.
Personal delivery service.
Thank you. Thank you.
You put the rest on the.
We'll say that we've got some if the public would like to see some. Certainly, we've got some extra copies here.
And then can these be made public? This is
Absolutely,
public
yes.
information, so
Yeah.
we could post that.
They were delivered to me via
As well.
email. I'm sure if my city attorney would tell me that makes them public. They don't face any of the potential redactions or withhold
Great, okay.
clauses, so I'm happy to make them public. Although I would provide it with a caveat that we're still refining our data collection. This data was collected by Howard, Howard Center through they have a online active program on their devices, so they can keep, actually, minute by minute, each case they get involved with, they enter statistics so that we can kind of track what's going on. So first I'd like to thank you for the invitation. For the community that might not know me, coming up on 12 years as your police chief, Trevor Whipple, and I'm pleased to be here. And let my co-presenter introduce himself as well for the viewing community.
I'm Sean Burke, Deputy Chief of Police, and I am Chief Whipple's understudy at the current time.
A well-chosen one. Been having a great transfer here, a great overlap period. So I'll keep, I think, brief, kind of the introduction of community outreach. I know the council has heard about that. I know this is more an update, but in case anyone is not aware, back towards the beginning of the year, there was a dialogue about a need for some on-site clinicians, some immediate resource available to our frontline staff, to our men and women in the police department to assist and engage with community members, visitors to the communities who might be struggling with various unmet social service needs. We actually were able to stand that up in very short order, and right around April 30th, launched a community outreach program. We have 4 community outreach workers serving currently 6 different communities, 6 different municipalities who have come to the table to share the service of 4 people. For anyone that hasn't met them, this was a very congenial collaborative hiring process where Howard invited all of us to the table to take part in review of applications, interviews, to really make sure we selected the right people. Now, from April to now, so some 4, almost 5 months into the program, I have to tell you that everybody that came to the table to try to form this community outreach program got it right. The people that we have on staff, the people that have been hired, the 4 community outreach workers, each bring a very unique, very different skill set to the game. Their personalities are very different. Collectively as a group, they click. They work well together, and they also do great handoffs. So that if we have a community outreach worker assigned to our community, but for some reason they're not connecting with the individual who needs assistance, if maybe the individual who needs assistance is already connected with a different community outreach worker, a phone call is made and we make a switch, we get the right person at the right place at the right time. So it has been really showing us some great successes. We have seen tremendous value. The vision was that we would see value. Clearly, we have tons of anecdotes that we could provide. Just today, I went to have lunch with a friend who was retired from Barry, leaving a certain spot that I won't make public, just because I don't want to give credit to any one restaurant over another, but, and heard a call come in for a 13-year-old child who had gone after his mother and his sister with a knife. They had been barricaded in the bathroom, were afraid. He had physically assaulted the mother. She had minor injuries, but she had been assaulted, and now he had a knife and was threatening them. The child is a child with autism, had had some challenges before. They had been working with the social service agency in the area to bring needed resources to the family and to this 13-year-old. So our officers were dispatched to basically a person with a weapon threatening to do violent harm to another individual. 2-3 years ago, we would have responded with armed police officers with no other tools in the tool belt for us. We would have certainly tried our best to use de-escalation. We would have tried our best to take control of that situation without a use of force. But we would not have had any additional resources. It would have just been the men and women, the cops on the front line. That would have been it. Today, on the other hand, as this call came in, before the officers even were sent there, the community outreach worker was dispatched at the same time. we have an individual who's struggling, a family in need, we need a community outreach worker to also respond to this call. Now, certainly they're not going to march in the front door with an individual with a knife, but they're going to be there, and they were there on site to help guide, to help make recommendations to the officers on how to approach this situation, on how to engage with an individual who has autism. The end of that resulted in everyone very quickly becoming calm, the entire family. The community outreach worker was able to go in, sit down, work with that family, and before we realized it, the police were released. And the police were told this is a safe scene, all the knives have been taken away, and frankly, the presence of the police officers weren't necessarily a helpful presence at the time. This was more, a child struggling with their autism. So the community outreach worker was able to work with another social service agency to have a safety plan for the family. The child did not have to be removed from the home. There was some planning done so that the child and the family wanted the child in the home with them. 2 years ago, that child probably would have been forced out of the home and into a state placement somewhere. So I think that was just one very real, one very current example of just how effective this program is. We're seeing community outreach on a regular basis responding without and instead of the police. I see the number of calls to mental health issues in particular where the police just aren't even going. It's a low-level call, there's no threat of violence, there's no concern about safety, and the officer is relieved of that call. They don't even have to go. We see where the community outreach team has now been interfacing directly with the businesses in our community. They have posters that they've distributed and said, if you see an individual that you feel is struggling with any unmet social service need, they seem hungry, they seem to be not properly attired, you can call the police if you have a fear for safety or it's an urgent situation. But if it's not, it's just this person is struggling with something, call direct to community outreach. It bypasses even our call center, and the community outreach worker can make a decision. If they feel that they want a police officer to go with them, then they call our communications center and get a police officer dispatched. But in most cases, they may already be familiar with the person. They go out alone, and they again take that call off the police officer's plate so that they can take care of more urgent matters. They're making, our community outreach workers are making proactive visits. If they know that there's been somebody struggling that from time to time we get called to, they go and check in on them before there's even a call. Hey, how are you doing? I talked with you last week. Everything okay? Is there anything else I can do to help you? So we don't get repeat calls or repeat concerns to the community. We see these community outreach workers working on a daily basis, hand in hand and side by side with the men and women in our police department, dispatchers, our civilian staff, and our sworn staff at helping to educate, helping them to understand how to engage with folks in our community that have some significant struggles. And not in our agency, but one of the agencies participating in this program, there was a police staff person who was personally suffering some pretty difficult struggles and was having a really tough time. And through the relationship with the community outreach worker who was in that police station every day said, hey, you know, I'd really like to talk to you. And that community outreach worker was able to connect them with services to help them with their personal issue. So, you know, what we're seeing come out of this program is, I expected we would see good things. I did not expect to this level or this degree. So quickly to go over the statistics sheets I gave you. The first one is the two-sided sheet, and it's labeled April 30 to June 30. So that's the first 2 months. That's May and June. And if we look at it, I've got a cheat sheet I wrote on here. Of course, I didn't say I gave it to one of you, but I didn't. So if we look at that April to June, of particular interest to me is about halfway down that front page, and it's in red. So it's showing South Burlington, from April to June, had 50 face-to-face services by our community outreach worker. There was 171 total in all the communities. So we consume 30%, we were 30% of the workload of these 6 communities. Now they have listed Burlington. Burlington is not participating in community outreach. They have their own street outreach program. But just for statistical purposes, they list if they need to go and assist in Burlington. But if we look at 50, the next nearest one is Winooski is 31. So what we are seeing is that I knew there would be need here. There is significant need here. We are using their services continually.
Do you have
and
any
we'll-
idea why that is? I mean, because Colchester has about the same population, don't they, or Essex, as South Burlington?
I believe Colchester is similar, the 18,000 range,
Yeah, but we're
You know, I
twice the
don't-
number. Is it our density?
You know, I think this will be a question that, so these community outreach workers, one thing they've done is they don't want over familiarity between either the outreach worker and the community, the police and the outreach worker. So they rotate on a week-by-week basis. They're assigned to a community for 1 week, then they rotate to the next community. And there's 4 workers for 6 communities. So Shelburne has their own, we have our own, and then I forget how it's split. I think it might be Colchester and Williston share one, and Essex and Winooski, I might get that wrong, but they share a worker. So they rotate every week. So we could go back and ask them, all 4 of them would have a pretty good understanding of why us more. I don't know if we're clearly, we have more police calls for service. I think in many instances we're a more densely populated community, although landmass might be bigger, our housing is a little more dense. We have certainly more retail. So we have the mall, we have a lot larger shopping centers. We also have more hospitality, so we have more hotel motels in this community than anywhere else.
Okay.
And
All right.
more need for outreach workers. I wish I could tell you why, for sure. Certainly a question we can ask, and when we come back, could answer that. And then on the back sheet, on the back page of that April to June listing, just simply again shows out of 270 total contacts that can be phone. The first page was face-to-face. They also do telephone contacts. We're 81 out of 270. So again, 30% of the load of community outreach is coming from South Burlington. And then I gave you 2 additional sheets. The information came in separately, so I did not have a chance to print them back to back. They go together, and that's the July to August. So sorry, Councilor.
On the table on the back page of this, the contact initiated from, I see 86 from police. Do we have any breakdown of which police departments are initiating? And is that possibly the explanation that SB is initiating more of these?
You know, that could be, and clearly, although it's not in this statistical report, it definitely is in the data they're collecting, and we could ask for them to produce a report of that fashion. That is a potential explanation. One thing that has amazed me is that I've warned the community outreach worker when we hired them. Law enforcement can be a bit of a closed group when we start working with people. We have to build trust, particularly to civilian people that we've never met, is that we have a lot of confidential information. When we're going into potentially volatile situations, you really want to have a good read on people. You want to trust them and know what to expect from them. This team that they've hired, these 4 individuals, there was almost no acclimation period. It was instant acceptance. The personalities, the job knowledge, the intellect that they bring has been phenomenal. And it may be some of that relationship where the police are reaching out more, saying, hey, you could help me with this. Or we hear many times after the fact, hey, I was at a family yesterday. We don't have coverage on the weekends, so it might have been an officer that worked the weekend who on Monday morning goes to the community outreach worker and says, gee, I went to a family yesterday afternoon, and I think it would be good if you'd follow up and check in with them. So that is a potential reason for it. So the second sheet is just a little bit briefer, but a similar statistical analysis of the first sheet, only this is the most recent period, so it's really only about 6 weeks. It's July and August, not even 2 full months. And what we see there is that we in South Burlington, halfway down on the full page, shows 41 calls out of 129. That's 32%. So again, we're driving the lion's share of it. And then on the individual page, that's only about a quarter full, is the total contacts per community. And there again, I did not do the statistical run on it, but I think we're running about just under 30%, 41 of calls out of 134. And it's, I won't go through line by line, but if you look at the full pages of those, the front pages of each, it really talks about all the opportunities that community outreach has had to engage with people and what the outcomes have been, how they've been able to provide services. We've had a family, and I believe it was shared maybe the last time I was here, but we had a family in this community who had reached out who, if anything could go wrong in their family, it did. parent illness, parent losing a job, some mental health issues, some finance issues. They were having difficulty with housing. They were going to be evicted. They didn't have money for food. There was some depression issues, and just a myriad. You talk about unmet social services need. They had everyone going for them, and were really in the depths of real struggles. And we were able to, this was before community outreach even officially started. We just saw a real need and connected them, and they went out, and they continue to this day to interface with that family just to make sure that they're remaining connected with services, that they know what's available to help them, and it really has helped that family to be in a much better place.
Tom?
I wanted to say I love this type of reporting, numbers to dig into. It really gives me an idea at this high level what's going on in the community. In my other role at the university, at the Student Affairs Committee, we get similar reports of incidents, and one thing that's a little more meaningful and gaining insight into the patterns of our student body at certain times of the year, rather than monthly breakouts, weekly, because monthly you can get 3 weekends that fit in a month and then 5 in another one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, going forward, it might be helpful to understand on a week by week over 52 weeks out of the year what these incidents are, so look at patterns as we compile it from year to year.
Sure, yeah, and these are Howard-produced reports, but certainly, we can ask Howard for anything, and I know that they want to report out because we want to clearly understand, is this program worth continuing? Should it be minimized? Should it be expanded? And I think data helps to drive our decisions and lets us know if what we're doing is effective.
What I find striking is how mental health concerns really dropped from 161, and I realize it's a shorter span of time, but still it dropped to 3. So that's a...
I was pondering the same thing.
Yeah.
This doesn't capture 2 weekends this month. Is there a spike in these incidents on the weekends, on Friday and Saturday nights and Sundays?
Not with this data that you're seeing, because this is Howard-captured community outreach worker data. They don't work on the weekends or nights.
Huh.
So you're not going to have data from, this is all Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 right now. We will look at adjusting hours as we get further down the road in the program, getting some night coverage, maybe some weekend coverage. Right now, this is solely Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. That's the only time it's available to us. So this data is coming just from that time period. Yeah, and I can't explain that. I have some of our police data as well, and I'm sorry I did not print this, but what we're seeing is continued growth, and actually we're seeing even more calls at the police department, because now sometimes situations that we might not have delved into might be a shoplifting situation, and we might have just left it as it's a shoplifting. That person has some issues, they stole, and we considered it just a straight crime issue. Now when an officer goes and they say, well, gee, maybe the person is shoplifting because there's some underlying mental health or substance abuse issue, or maybe even a need at home, we can now convert that into a community outreach situation and say, this really comes up as a community outreach problem or a community outreach issue. So we're seeing our calls grow in that issue of particularly mental health crises calls. I don't know if that necessarily means we're having more of them. I think it might be that we're just addressing more of them. So it will take a little bit of time for the statistics to kind of balance out. We've seen it since community outreach started, and we knew this would happen. But pre-community outreach, we had a baseline of mental health issues. When community outreach started, we're seeing it grow. But I do think that's because of better identification and addressing them correctly. Instead of a disorderly conduct, somebody who maybe is making a public spectacle on the sidewalk, we might have considered that a year ago a disorderly conduct cases. That's just somebody who's screaming at nothing. Now we better recognize that no, that's a person that has an underlying mental health issue, and maybe we should try to connect them with services to get some help.
I wonder if the emotional and behavioral versus the mental health concerns, if there's a clearer definition over time, as you kind of, although these are the mental health specialists, so they shouldn't be changing.
Right.
Well, I'm just curious if they got into some kind of service.
Maybe they got help, so they now are not calling.
And some of it too is them.
You can track that somehow.
They are assessing how they're coding as well. When we first start collecting statistical data, day one we collect it a certain way and we code, so okay, if I see this type of behavior, I'm going to call it a mental health concern. Where once we get down the road a little bit, they might say, well, let's better define this. Now, it's not really a mental health concern, it's an emotional behavioral concern, because they're exhibiting these types of behavior. So because this is just a very few months, this might be some adjustment in how they're coding things as well. And you know, if the council really wishes to dig further into kind of what this data means and where it comes from, you know, I'm certain that the folks from Howard who are actually collecting this would be happy to come in and discuss at a much higher level really how they're coming to this data and how they're collecting it.
Well, it certainly would be interesting to know that if an intervention in August connected someone with the services they need, then presumably they wouldn't, or not presumably, but potentially they wouldn't need to call again later because their issues are resolved or there's, you know, a different crisis.
Yeah, if it's the right service, they're accepting of it and they stay with it. I mean, what we know is with
I don't know how you track that, but that's sort of that would really say that this is worth its weight in gold.
Sure. Yep. And what I know from experience is many times you help someone find their way to services, and when they start to get better, they feel that they don't need those services anymore. They discontinue them, then they become unhealthy again, don't realize they need services, and we're back at it. So, you know, one of the benefits of community outreach is, I call it, if it's an appropriate term, I call it maintenance, is that, you know, if they do connect someone with services and they see that maybe they've been resistant or maybe they feel that they're at risk of feeling better, becoming more healthy, and discontinuing those services, our community outreach workers can circle back and just say, hey, Joe, you know, are you still seeing your therapist? Are you still taking your medication? And they can encourage them to continue with the services that have been helping them.
You have a question, Tim?
Yeah, so do you have any feeling for what the intervention success rate is for the suicide calls?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. You know, I looked through the suicide calls for the July to August, and we've had no completed suicides during that time period. Now, whether I can attribute that to community outreach engaging with someone and helping them to not make that decision, I don't know. I think that I suppose we could try to draw a connection to someone that may, you know, have suicidal ideation and trying to follow that person to see if that act was ever taken.
I was just curious. I know it's hard to reflect that kind of thing. This is a great story, and you know what? It really dovetails well with Lisa Bettinger, who was here 2 meetings ago, right?
Right.
And her whole restorative justice.
Yeah. And I don't want to give my, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I get a little excited about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, so it's the same story, right? So what I like about this is that it shows a more caring method for dealing with, you know, crisis or sub-crisis events that happen in the community that I don't think was probably occurring as much as it can now, right? So, and then Lisa's programs attempt another, you know, after something is done, somebody's been arrested or gone through the system, right, trying to help again.
Right.
That's the thing that's missing, which is which we all are struggling with our society, right, is how to minimize these ever getting to you in the first place, right? And no society is perfect. I'm sure that some Europeans would argue with me on that, but yeah, you know, we're at the tail, right? It's like if you have ideas how to work at the head,
right.
And I know that everybody does. That would be great, but this is a just from the number, and then I'm sure that for that Saturday and Sunday, and I think we talked about this last time, is that those in-car conversations between the outreach workers and the officers probably lends to then gaining some informal training that helps them on the weekends, I would suppose, right? I would hope so.
Yeah, and we were talking about, even if we are at that intense call, someone who's threatening suicide and is in the act of threatening and prepared to and enabled to do self-harm, you know, we put a cop on the front line trying to engage with that person to de-escalate, to try to convince them not to go through with the act. You know, now we have someone with mental health experience side by side with that cop about here's how to approach this, here's what to say, here's what not to say. You know, we, for years, and we will always be, we are the generalists. We are the only place where you call, we gum. We don't, it's rare we tell you no. If there's anything that seems of any urgency or danger, we come. It's tantamount to, you go out on February morning and your car won't start. Well, I call the police. They'll come help my car start. Well, you have someone at home struggling with a mental health issue. Society is not, we're not skilled, we're not taught, we're not conditioned to, and we don't have access to immediate mental health clinicians. It's like someone in my family is struggling with a mental health issue. Well, I call the 811 to get the emergency mental health team. We call the cops. We've been using the wrong tool. We haven't been bringing the right tool to the problem, and this is the right tool, frankly. I could talk forever, and Sean, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, not unless there's a specific question. I have a great deal of history of working with the team that was in Burlington, and I'll tell you, operationally, when we were dealing with either folks that are barricaded or actively violent, but yet we had contained, oftentimes, although we had trained crisis negotiators, you do work with the outreach team member just in developing rapport and themes. And they can give you insight into what that person's actually thinking, and we can avoid a violent encounter, and that's what the police want to do. We want to avoid violent encounters. And this mechanism here, what would be interesting to know with some of these numbers is how many people are actually responsible, for what's driving these numbers, because there's a lot of repeat. A lot of these folks are really, really complex. And to meet them, be able to meet them where they're at and try to deal with the crisis of the day is super important to that person, super important to their loved ones. And it's hard to measure that, through numbers. There's an emotional side to that. And I know that the cops are prone to call for this service because our police officers, they want to help people. That's why we're the #1 consumer. They're seeing an opportunity and they're intersecting the services. And that's work, that this chief and the organization has cultivated over years and has much to be proud of as a result.
Well, I would think that it would, knowledge about this program and its impact on policing could be helpful in recruitment, finding people who are interested in joining the force.
Recruitment and retention, because I must tell you, one of my focus points over the last couple of years, the department's focus point with Kevin and Tom's support and assistance has been employee wellness. And I can tell you that the overall stress level of our officers who are responding to very difficult situations has been reduced with the knowledge of, I've got my community outreach worker riding in the passenger seat with me. Or I know community outreach is on the way. And frankly, there have been some situations in our community where it takes two. We have had our community outreach worker, because we have multiple issues going on in the family, we'll have our community outreach worker and they'll call the one from Shelburne and say, get this out Burlington, I need you on this call with me. So we have that resource as well, where sometimes one isn't enough. But generally in the building, our officers are stressed when the community outreach worker isn't there. It's like, what do you mean they're in training today? What are we going to do? There's now this expectation and this comfort level of, I know somebody's here to bring additional tools to the table for us.
And you also have your in-department counseling services too, right?
Right.
We have a contract with a clinician particularly for employee-based, and we also have, and this continues to grow, and I've talked with Chief Burke, and I know it will continue to grow. We have peers within the department. So we have, I think we're up to 6, maybe even 8 now, staff members who are trained as peer support people. So we have folks who are in roll call together as peers, working together, who are trained to recognize signs and symptoms in their coworkers where somebody might need to be pulled aside or pulled offline, maybe even given a little time off to deal with issues that are causing restraint.
I have one last question.
Yes.
Do you have a chance to discuss this with the state police at all, your success and how they could possibly take advantage of this? And
they actually were doing it before us. They have one clinician assigned up north. I don't know if it's the St. Albans barracks. It's just one person. Is it St. Albans? And they started just a little bit before, maybe a year before us. So they're doing it there, but I'm frankly amazed, and it's probably the economics of it. I'm amazed that they don't have somebody in every barracks around the state, because the payback here, we can't necessarily show. And we might be able to show in diversion from police calls that we've saved some real dollars there. There's savings in the human toll, both for the individuals who are being assisted by these community outreach workers, and frankly, our team. And when you say recruitment, I do believe that it is a real and valuable recruitment tool. And I have heard people say, well, what do you mean you have a community outreach person on staff? 40 hours a week, they're right here to help us with anything we need. And from a retention, we see officers dealing with these very difficult situations that frankly we train them, we try to teach them, but they're police officers, they're not mental health clinicians, they're not crisis workers. So they have a base level of knowledge. The community outreach team, this is their life, this is what they do, this is what they went to school for. So for the police officer to know that this level of support is there for the officer, for the community, really pays dividends in the human toll.
Well, I look forward to having you get these reports, maybe not a presentation every quarter,
Just
but
seeing
I think the council, I would think, would like to see the data that you're collecting, and if there's a question, invite you in. And this just makes me very proud of this community, that we recognize this as a valuable program and a need that we're addressing in a really tough topic or area. And I look forward to continuing to look at the data to continue to believe that it's worth the investment.
Yeah, and in my twilight here, this is a wonderful legacy to have here, and and I appreciate Kevin's support in the funding to stand this up. I think that there is significant return on the investment here. In memory of Councilor Nowak, we're getting one heck of a return on our money here.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I'm sorry, are there any comments from the public?
Sure. First, I just want to echo what you said, that it makes me really proud of our community to have this too, to think so progressively and compassionately about our residents. I'm just really proud of that. I had a question about age. What are you seeing in terms of age-related ages and calls, and will there be some coordination once schools are back in session with school teams that are supporting youth, where there might be calls?
I don't have statistics on age, and I wouldn't even want to guess anecdotally on what our age of service is. I do know that our outreach workers are routinely interfacing with our school resource officers, and if we have a school-age child that they have interfaced with, they're making sure that the school is aware of it. I don't know how much actual team meeting or anything like that with the school they're doing, but as the program grows, as they identify the need, they're reaching every aspect of the community they can with the time they have available to them.
Well, the face-to-face tells you total under 18,
Right.
and then total 18 and over, so they have that.
So that, yeah, good point, thank you.
Separated, but, and it's 22, well, let's see.
Many more majors,
Pardon me?
many more over 18.
Yeah, there's just 5 in South Burlington under 18 in the April to June.
And 45.
And 45 who are older, and then in this summer, 5 again under 18 and 36 over. So there are some children being served.
Right. And we still use the pre-existing services as well. So if a family was engaged with First Call already, and it's something where they have a connection with First Call and they need assistance, is that if we can call First Call and they say, yes, we have someone who can respond, then that stays with First Call because they've already been working with the family.
Thanks. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
But Chief Trevor, don't move.
Don't move, yeah. This one's much quicker.
The 7th item is consider and possibly approve a JAG grant application.
I'm sorry, I was...
This is the JAG grant.
Yes, it is,
application.
yes, the Justice Assistance Grant. And it's been, I don't know, I think it was here last year, but for the council and for the public, every year, the Office of Justice looks at department size, community size, Part 1 crimes, how many crimes are taking place in the community. And they have a formula that they utilize, and if you rise to a certain level, then they automatically grant you funds to help your community. The funds have a little bit of restriction on them. They're supposed to be used for something that hasn't been budgeted, something that the police agency sees a need in advancing the agency, helping the community. And so this year, we were automatically granted. They make the money available. We just need to raise our hand and say we want it. The amount was $10,427,000. And talking with my incoming chief here, looking at a need that we've really had in the agency for a number of years, and looking at some of the risk that police departments have, looking to our neighbors in Colchester. We have a rather archaic, it's effective, it does what we need it to do, but it's a little bit clunky evidence tracking system. So that when we bring in any piece of evidence, whether it be crime evidence, drugs, money, weapons, we have to inventory that. We have to address where did it come from, whose is it, why do we have it, where is it stored, if it's drugs, how much does it weigh, and then we have to track that. We need to make sure that it's not missing, that it's not lost. Sadly, in the Colchester's sake, that it's not diverted by an officer that's having difficulties. We basically have two systems now. We still have evidence that's tracked in a system that we stopped using probably 9 years ago. And that system is on borrowed time. And if it stops working, it stops working. There's no longer any support for that system. So we are proposing here to utilize these grant funds to buy an evidence tracking system. It's a computer database. It's a scanner just like going to Shaw's or Hannaford's. We punch in, it's a .38 caliber revolver. Here's the case number, the date and the time. We push a button, it prints out a barcode. We put a sticker on the evidence box. We scan it with the scanner and we say it's going in bin D2. And then we know it's there. And if we take it out for court, we scan it and say it's going out to court. If we take it to the lab, we scan it and say it's going to the lab. So this provides us really minute by minute, moment by moment, real 100% accountability for all the myriad of things we have in our evidence room. And frankly, in talking with Sean, we talked about, well, maybe this is just something that's so important, we'll try to shoehorn it in the budget somewhere. Frankly, this came along and it's like, here's the perfect opportunity to not stress the budget and delay some other expenditure and use this to get us where we should be in best practices.
How long do you have to keep evidence? I mean,
Depends
like
on the nature of the
forever?
crime. Yeah, so in like a homicide investigation, yes. But the statute of limitations on the crime itself dictates how long we have to hold on to it. The other thing that an active management system would afford is evidence that we bring in, say it's the screen from the kitchen window to be processed because the home is burglarized. Well, it shows it going in, it shows the lab processing it. Now it'll remind the officer it's time to return the screen and get it out of the room. And that helps us with some very, very basic quality control measures. And it's also cloud-based, so it won't sit on server. And right now, like the chief had mentioned, all of our evidence is run through whatever records management system that we have. If the old one dies, it's gone. The detectives have worked extremely hard to populate that back into the new records management system. But again, records management systems have a lifespan, and when this one goes, then potential will be spanned across 3. This allows us to consolidate onto one, cloud-based, actively managed. And the timing's actually very opportune because we're going to have a change of command audit on the property room. That way Chief Whipple knows that everything that the officer said came in is there and accounted for. And as I take over, I know that the evidence room is squared away and ready to go forward, so we don't have a situation like Colchester faced. Yeah.
So do you run out of space? Is this like the records?
Yeah.
I
mean, we could. And as Chief Burke says, this is a tickler system. So it's, hey, this is not a piece of evidence that we normally would save indefinitely. And investigator X, do we still need to keep this? If not, return it. Get it back to the people that it should be with and not keep it forever. And to answer your initial question, there is some evidence that's in the back corner that probably will be there twice as long as we're around, just because it has long shelf life, long statute of limitations. And we're looking at now, the Innocence Project, where they're going back to homicide evidence, sexual assault evidence, and retesting it because a new, some of the evidence that was in our evidence room, when we put it in there, DNA technology didn't exist. And what we don't know is what's next. What's the technology that will next be invented, and can that technology be used for serious crimes, homicide evidence, to retest under a new platform?
Ancestry.com.
Yeah.
So do you ever proactively retest? I mean, you have, I don't know, a rape sample, and, it's 30 years old, and it probably didn't have the newest technology.
Most agencies have already gone through that process because really the latest and greatest is DNA. So the state has a database, CODIS, and old evidence, old DNA profiles that you've had been submitted, and you actually get hits back. Be that this defendant was swabbed because of this conviction, and then you get an email from the lab saying your burglary from 6 years ago is this person, which then is reason for the officer to go get a new court order, get a new DNA sample from the defendant to definitively link the defendant to that crime. So though that technology is, that's probably even 10 years old by now, but like the chief said, we don't know what's next. And we don't even know the limitations. Like in the 70s and early 80s, hair evidence was really hot in law enforcement. But unfortunately, some of the adhesives that were used when those hair samples were lifted and placed on cards and used as clear tape, the adhesive degraded the follicle, so the DNA is not present. So it's constantly evolving. Who knows what's next? I have to tell you though, the detectives at South Burlington have just done an amazing job with that property room. There's plenty of room. Everything is neat and orderly. I was literally speechless when they showed us. He was. Because I've seen another one in a nearby location. It does not look that way.
Do we have any rape kits that have been untested? I mean, you read about it in the newspaper or hear it on the news that, they have thousands that are just sitting somewhere. Do we have any?
So we have a detective at the Chittenden Unit for Special Investigation, and they are responsible for the kits that are taken at the UVM ED. And in a similar fashion, those slides and samples can be compared against CODIS. It depends on, the solubility then depends on whether or not the victim is willing to partake in prosecution or further the investigation. But that's a long way of saying that the evidence is, yes, preserved. The status of the case is somewhat driven by, one, the fruit of that forensic work, and two, where the victim is at in that process.
But our kits go directly through CUSI to the state lab, and they do the work on them there.
I would just upload it all the Ancestry and just wash it
Yeah.
The whole thing.
I just, have you already been assured that you're going to receive the 10,000 plus?
Well, it's full transparency. Last year's money that you approved, that has been granted to us, we have the grant paperwork. The check has not been cut yet. We are one of the states that the current administration is holding this level of federal funding because we're considered a sanctuary state. There have been 3 court cases now that have said they can't do that, they must release the money. We still haven't seen the check. But we do have in writing, we have a commitment that the money is coming, it's ours, when they'll release it.
So we need a
Let's do our
motion
part.
to
I move
approve.
that we approve.
So now, and I don't know process here, but one of the requirements of this grant is there needs to be an opportunity for public comment. I don't know if that's post-motion vote or pre. I don't know if the council.
Probably make the motion and then.
It wasn't in our package.
Yeah, we can always
Usually
take
it's a
testimony
document.
after we make a motion.
All right, so I will move that we approve the JAG grant application.
Second.
Okay, is there any public comment? Some applause, some quiet applause. Okay, seeing none. Any other discussion? Ready to vote? Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Lisa.
Steve.
Okay, item 9 are announcements in the city manager's report.
Do you want to do that now, or do you want to skip down to number 11? Just because we're so far behind in there.
Okay, we can do that?
Yeah.
Sure.
People waiting in the audience.
So let's move, if everyone is agreeable, we'll move down to 11 with the council interviews. And let's see. Let me get to my.
They're all listed on the short page.
Yes, and I was just wanting to do the order. Did people get told times, or should we just start with Tom Bailey? We'll go left to right. So Tom,
We have 15 minutes.
we have 15 minutes.
Till the
Make
break,
it
till the
quick.
pause.
Oh, till the pause.
It won't take that long.
All
We're
right.
supposed to be already home watching.
What you what?
Okay, welcome, Tom. You're interested in joining, no, continuing.
Re-upping into the
Continuing
Affordable
with
Housing
the
Committee,
Affordable Housing
on
Committee.
which I've served 2 years.
Okay, and I'm trying, I haven't gotten to the page. I can't remember, your participation was like 70% or something? Is
My
that right?
what?
Your participation at the meetings was about 70%? Is that what I read
I have no
on
idea.
your application? Or maybe someone filled that in?
Maybe someone filled it in.
Okay,
I haven't missed too many.
okay. It didn't appear as if you had. You attended 14 of 20 meetings, 70%, okay. Questions, or do you want to make a couple comments? Any thoughts about
I
where
want
it's
to do it
going?
again.
And you want to do it again, okay.
We're doing some progressively good work, getting better, and I'd like to participate.
Okay. Any questions?
I'm looking for one. Sorry. I suggest that we move to it, and I have to look for it just a minute.
That's okay.
My feelings aren't hurt if there aren't any questions.
Well, I think that memory serves. One of the questions that I had was, have you had any experience? Yes, you have, because you're an incumbent, so what's the other question I asked? What types of affordable housing do you see as most pressing for the city?
What types of affordable housing? All of it. I see housing generally as.
For which demographic, I guess, is?
Oh, I'd say that demographics, well, if it's pressing for people who are seeking affordable housing, I mean, first, everybody should have housing. Pressing would certainly be for people who are homeless on the bottom end. Working class have to expend a lot, generally more than what is reasonable for rent, or for housing, or for purchase. It's an area, this is a situation that's been the case in Vermont for a long time. We all know that. And it's something that we are trying to come up with mechanisms to improve on. Does that answer your question, sort of?
Sure. And then what skills do you think you've brought to the committee?
What skills do you think I brought to the committee? I have no idea. I used to. Here's Leslie. She's also, now she brings skills. She works for.
Modesty, brings modesty to me.
No, no, she actually is the data person and works for Vermont Housing Finance Agency and is.
Tom bring form-based codes or familiar?
Yeah, I was active on the form-based code committee and have a background in zoning and planning. I've been on planning commission and chair of a planning commission in another locality. So I tend to think of things in those terms.
While we were chatting at the last block, Sandy Dooley sent an endorsement for both of you to continue on the Affordable Housing Committee. She sent it to all of us. So
Good.
Another committee member thinks that you should also continue.
Okay. We're trying
Any
to
other
work well
questions?
together.
All right, well, thank you very much
Thanks.
for your past service and potentially your future,
Potentially.
or continue. Well, you have some competition this time.
Well, and I'm not sure if, I mean, if
there's
there's
other
somebody
people
else applying that I do not
Right.
know, I think John Simpson, who's our chair, is of the opinion that we shouldn't necessarily be limited to 7. In other words, if somebody is interested and has qualifications, we can take them on. We'd like to help. I think Leslie would agree.
Okay, thank you. All right, Leslie, you're up next.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for waiting and being patient. I
Oh, it was
apologize,
interesting.
I'm a little late, but go ahead.
I'd love to continue serving on the Affordable Housing Committee.
What types of housing do you think we need most in this community?
Well, like Tom, I think the people with the most urgent needs are the homeless and folks spending more than half of their income for their housing right now. And we do have about 1,000 households in South Burlington that are spending that much. And that's not really sustainable. That doesn't leave enough money for other basic needs, and there's usually a pretty direct correlation between the income level of the household and their likelihood of spending half their income for housing. So those folks need us most, but they're also the most expensive types of households to help in terms of providing affordable housing, and I'm not sure that helping them is exactly the levers it's not really one of the levers that I think municipalities have best access to. I think we may be able to set the stage for becoming more inclusive for families like that, but we can also help families who are struggling, but not quite at the extremely low income level that I was describing.
Do you think the inclusionary zoning is as aggressive as it could be?
Well, the problem with the inclusionary zoning approach, I think that can do a lot to improve the affordability of housing at around the middle of the income range, but it doesn't really provide any capital to the builders of housing. It provides a little bit of a carrot in terms of usually some kind of a carrot like density bonus or something that improves the balance sheet for the builder, but it's not a big enough of a chunk of money to enable them to build the housing at a total cost that'll make it affordable for very low income people. I think when we see municipalities that are doing that, there's a bigger carrot that goes along with the inclusionary housing policy, like a subsidy.
All right, any other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much for your service. You bring a lot of expertise and
As we heard.
assistance to the committee, well, just by virtue of where you work.
Well, it's a great committee.
And,
We've really,
I appreciate that.
I've enjoyed serving, and I'd be happy to continue. Thanks so
Great.
much.
Thank you so much. Let's see, is Bob breaking? No. Mary Jo Riel? She's not here. MJ? Mark Dickinson? He's not here. Chuck Brodsky? Larry? Larry's here. Yep.
Right at the right time.
He knew he'd run late.
So,
He knew he'd run late.
yeah. So Larry, you want to join yet another committee,
Well,
the dog park committee, as I understand.
I understand it to be the new dog park.
The new dog park committee, yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you told us why. You know how often they meet, and you know what it's like to serve on a committee?
No, I haven't had any contact with them. I've read their report. I understand there's a bit of contention around the issue. I see it as a land use issue, much like any other use of public resources. I'd really like to see the Parks and Rec Department be really involved in it. And I understand that there's also some thought about who the committee should report to and so on. And I should...
Oh, I don't think there's any question now.
That's good.
They're an independent committee.
Yeah.
They report to us.
Right.
They work with
Right.
Parks and Rec.
Yeah, and so, and I don't own a dog.
Have you ever owned a dog?
My mother had a dog when I was a child. I remember that dog very fondly.
Remind me, Larry, which other committee you're on?
I'm the chair of the Housing Trust Fund,
Thank you.
Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
So,
And I have some arm's length from their deliberations, only because there's financial aspects to what we do versus the policy aspect. But what I'm really concerned about or interested in is, finding a place for dog owners to have a place to run their dogs, and hopefully not at Red Rocks. But ultimately, what my interest is hoping to relieve Red Rocks from some of the, it's not a burden, but some of the folks who feel as if that's their dog park, and some of the amenities, and so that's my interest.
And I would agree with you off leash. How about if there were to be a fenced-in area somewhere in Red Rocks?
That's very possible. Yeah. I think that this year's effort to open the gate and have people park in there was very interesting because nobody went in. Even though the gate was open, everybody still parked. So I think that there are areas there, particularly in the parking areas, that could work. But according to the matrix, there's consideration of neighbors and noise and all of that. And so and having some public input about the whole, the second issue. I'd also like to explore more about the airport land.
That seems to be off bounds.
But I think it's worth exploring.
Is he the only applicant who is not a dog owner?
Yes.
I think so. He's a former dog owner.
It's been I was a child.
You were a child. Well, did you
in the-
have to feed it or take it
I
for
was,
walks?
no, I just remember it very fondly.
Oh,
After that, we had cats.
they're harder to.
Which I prefer cats, actually.
All the animals that you had in your house, they're colored.
We actually had a very allergic daughter, and we never had any pets in the home.
That's a good reason not to.
Yeah, well, I'm sure she appreciated that.
Yeah, that's for all not happy about.
Well, if there are no other questions, I appreciate your interest in joining a committee that has a history. And
Do you have experience writing fact sheets and plans, things like this?
Writing fact sheets? If I knew the facts, I could probably write them down.
That's very good. That's a good answer.
But knowing the facts, I think, is the important thing, and getting to sort of the crux of the issue with regard to either noise or neighbors' complaints or open space, or or just the budget and the maintenance of of who owns the land and so on.
Do you have any mediator skills in case there are disagreements?
I think that's why Maggie asked me to join, to be honest with you. Whether there's skills or not, I will have to see, but.
yes, no, he has certainly a reputation for that.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah.
The proof will be, when we
Right.
make some decision.
All right, well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sam, handy.
Just the itself,
No?
besides, dog owners,
Yeah.
Amanda Holland? And Amanda, you identified two committees?
Yes, I should have made that more apparent. I currently serve on both of those committees.
And is this application really for both of them or not? Or just for?
I
let me see.
believe.
Oh, no, you talked about public art, yes. and
Yeah, I
about
believe both of my
bicycle.
terms are up.
Okay. And you have 100% attendance, bike and pet. Congratulations.
I was on maternity leave, but I feel like those were excused.
So,
Congratulations.
yeah, congratulations. What did you have?
A little girl. She's 2 now, so. It was a
Oh,
while
so
ago.
that was a while ago. She's just getting interesting. Well, they are too. They're pretty. Yeah, they're pretty exciting too, though.
It's still interesting.
True, true. So you understand clearly how often the committees meet and the kind of time involved. Are you back at work?
Yes.
So you still believe you have the time to attend it? To the art committee doesn't meet all that often, does it?
No. Well, yeah, that's as needed. So, yeah, it's still a fun way to be involved in the community.
Okay. Questions?
Just congratulations too on the vote.
Yes, that's very exciting.
Excited, congratulations.
Yeah.
How do you think that we could advocate to have people commute by bike?
Oh. I think.
Better bike paths that we're gonna build.
Please let the candidate respond.
I think it's by having a mixture of the types of facilities. I mean, obviously, right now we are doing our best to serve. I would say right now we serve really the confident bikers and are with the on street, and then we do have those of us, myself included, that are more the recreation path because I don't want to be on the street. But I think if we were to do more, and part of what the committee has had discussions with Justin on is how can we just be through things like restriping to add bike lanes or just different facilities that can fit within our current system, and then maybe some signage. That would be one way to just improve conditions for all bikers, and maybe trying to get some of the workforce to be biking is a challenge that I think both us, our committee and the energy committee is really looking to do. But I think that would be one way, is to try to do where we can add bike lanes and signage. And then, of course, education to both bikers and drivers.
Yeah, both.
Yes.
Yeah, it really is, it's a two-way street.
It is.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
I will not put that in there.
Except bikers and cars go together.
Yeah, I mean, so if you, I don't want to bring this up, but as a biker and a motorist, right? As a biker, I notice motorists like passing me all the way in the left-hand lane when all they need is 3 feet, I don't want them to go way out of their way. I also have people that like want to graze me or scream at me out the window as they go by, And as a motorist, right, I hug the yellow line on the left, and I know that they've got at least 3 feet on the side because I have a small car, and that should be adequate, right? I don't have to cross the yellow line as long as the bikers are obeying the law by not riding two abreast and blocking traffic. And I think the rule is if you don't impede traffic, right, you can ride two abreast. If you're out in the middle of Charlotte, you can ride two abreast. If you're on Spear Street or Dorset, don't ride two abreast because there's a lot of traffic on those streets, So it is. There's educational opportunity for both bikers and car drivers. Yeah.
I think part of the education for the community is to just recognize how valuable having really good bike paths and lanes is to just tourism and quality of life. We just spent a week on the Cape, and the roads, we were in Orleans and Eastham, and the roads are teeny. There is not a bike lane. They have wonderful bike paths, but to get to them, you have to ride on the road. But both my husband and I were astounded at how polite and appropriate and careful the residents were. Never were we, people stopped and let us go ahead of them, and it was really, they sort of had drunk the Kool-Aid and recognized that that's a tourism plus for their community. So, you don't get any bonuses if you kill bikers. It's bad for business. So they just were overly attentive to what's appropriate and really recognizing, as were the bikers. Mm-hmm. In fact, when the first day we were there, there's huge bike fundraisers for, one of the cancer hospitals in Boston. And they had 5,000 bikers and so they closed off the street or one lane from Boston to Piedmont. which is 120 miles or something. It's a lot of coordination, but, you know, the public we went out in the front yard, we were cheering them on and stuff. It was really cool. And they raised $50 million.
I think that's
$50
something.
million
$50 million?
in one day, yes. Yeah, amazing. But, I mean, they really get it, that it's can be a really positive thing for the community. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? All right, thank you very much for your service.
Thank you for the Public Art Committee too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, George.
George, and then a break?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's the last one, so I figured
Yeah.
we should get through.
I agree.
Since we've got 5 that didn't show up. So welcome.
Good evening.
And you're interested in our new committee. No, I'm sorry, Parks and Rec is already on there. So you want to continue, your attendance rate was 66%, but
That is
you
correct.
probably travel a little bit for your work?
That is correct.
Have to go out of
Exactly.
state and stuff?
Yes.
Questions? From anyone?
You want a pool?
I would
You want a
love for our
pool.
community to have a pool. I would absolutely love it. I'd actually like for us to have some indoor Parks and Rec space. But very
Good
excited
answer.
about the potential opportunities that are being presented. Hope that we're able to make it work together, work for the community. Looking forward to hearing how it develops, actually, because it's really going to come down to, I think, you folks making it happen for us. Any questions for me?
Well,
No, do that, and, you know, we've got two potential locations.
I know, very
To
excited.
look at, and the one at Veterans Memorial Park really just came into the picture a week ago. We've got to, of course, see whether that really can work and make sense versus the Champlain Oil property.
Sure.
Once we figure that out, then we finalize what it's likely to cost and find money. But
Everything
I think
costs
folks are
money.
very committed to making it happen. And maybe someday in the distant future, there'll be a pool somewhere.
My kids are pretty well grown, so they won't get to enjoy
Pools
it.
are a challenge. And more so than basketball or pickleball.
Yes.
And, you know,
But we have a great community. And, I mean, when my kids were young, we would take them over to Essex, and every time I drove over there, I was like swearing to myself up the road, why is it that we can't have a nice, you know, place for the kids to go and swim? I mean, the lake is great, don't get me wrong. The beaches are beautiful, but
Water quality has not been that good this
it's
summer.
just, yeah, I mean, it's just unfortunate. And, I mean, Essex has IBM, so they could do quite a few really nice things. Like we were talking about earlier, what saddens me is that my daughters are going off to school, they're getting their degrees, and they're not coming back. And that's just so unfortunate that, I mean, it's outside the scope of this, obviously, but it is such an unfortunate thing that my kids are going to.
Why are they coming back?
Well, because the jobs aren't here.
There's no job.
Oh, yeah, it's a job thing, totally. And it's a bummer. Vermont, I hate to see it as a retirement community for people that have gone south and maybe they'll come back when they've made a lot of money and they can afford to buy a property here. But I mean, when I retire, I'm not entirely sure I'm going to be living here in Vermont. I mean, but that's not today. I mean, today we're talking about what we can do to make the community better for the families that are here. And recreation and parks is huge. I mean, the Valentine's dance, I took my daughters every year until they grew to the point where they were too old to go. It was just such a wonderful thing. And recreation and parks is what makes the community more than just a place you live. You know, the soccer, the Valentine's dance, those things are important. And, you know, there are some, I'm working with Rotary right now to try to do some opioid interdiction and try to develop ways that we can keep our kids safe. There are some really nasty things going on, and the chief could tell us all about it. We need recreation and parks to to give the kids the distraction and the occupy their minds with healthy things to keep them from being interested in doing stuff that they shouldn't necessarily be getting into.
Or shut down the internet.
Idle hands are the devil's workshop, and it's one of those things where my daughters ran cross country and track. That's what kept them out of trouble. There is no reason. The soccer camps were great. Keeping kids occupied, keeping them having a good time is the way we can really deal effectively with those type of challenges. And that's something that I would like to think we're all thinking about. I mean, I've talking with the intervention coordinator in Winooski, I was told that the tobacco industry spends about $140 per child in Vermont in advertising. What are we paying for recreation parks per child that can actually take advantage of those opportunities? Holly was here earlier, she could probably do the numbers and tell you exactly what that number is. Is it $140 a child? I'd like to think it was, but I doubt it is. And tax dollars are hard to come by. It takes a lot of money to build a pool. I'm pretty sure that those parents that lost their kids would write you a check if they could have their kid back. And they can't. Are we deficient in giving that kid something other than something to do other than getting into that kind of stuff? Are we? We're doing the best we can. Recreation Parks is busting their hump to provide quality activities. I mean, the Bikes and Bites and the City Fest and all of this, that's great.
George is currently the Rotary president too, so he's really been connecting when I went to the
Trying.
Rec and Parks Committee meeting, the Rotary into Rec and Park events.
Really trying. And, you can't bring a kid back. You can't. And we've got lots of adults, it's not just kids. But Recreation and Parks is focused on families and making this community a great place to live. Why on earth would anyone not want to be involved in that? It is a great, great program. And if we can get some funding to put in a pool, that'd be awesome. If we can get some funding to put up some, enclosed space.
But I think teenagers are a little,
You like pools?
yeah,
They're
but
absolutely
I
right.
don't think they're going to Bikes and Bites, to be
You're-
quite honest. I don't think they're going the first night. I think, and they're not going to Valentine's Day dance. And I think that.
They're definitely not doing that.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
And I think that they don't want to be with grown-ups. And they need
They don't want to be
in a
with
safe
their
place.
parents.
They don't want to be with their
I
parents.
don't necessarily agree.
I don't think they necessarily.
A lot of them are looking for mentors. There's a lot of young boys out there who are looking for father figures, mentors. Talk to the Cub Scouts, talk to the Boy Scouts. They are gangbusters. We've got some really good leadership in the Boy Scouts and the Cub Scouts right now. They are one of the largest troops in the state and the
And I think
region.
the Scouts are awesome.
It is a
right?
great program.
But you're not gonna replace that with Bikes and Bites. So how?
I never said that was the case.
I know, but that's what I see as a lack in our Recreation and Parks program, is really something that provides that brotherhood or sisterhood to a very, sensitive age group.
That's what that chill out center was, I'm sorry.
That's what the Chill Out Center was. I was gonna get to that. It's kind of a sore spot
Yeah.
for me. I think that was, an opportunity that, for whatever reason, it just, didn't.
We need something like that. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, and I think that he really brought something, and I mean, my son was there, and he said there were always people in there, and it was a safe spot. It was in the mall where a lot of teens do go. So I think that we have to think creatively for these teenagers. And I really, they're not all in Scouts, and I think Scouts is awesome, but they're not all in Scouts, and so.
Well, you look at the number of people you got working in your recreation and parks, there really aren't that many people in there. From my perspective, they count on volunteers to make a lot of this stuff work.
Mhm.
If you want to do things like that, if you
Mhm.
provide funding to them and guidance to the leadership of Parks and Rec or Redford Parks, they can make that stuff happen, but it isn't free, and it isn't
No.
inexpensive. It is expensive to do. And
Well-
you've got to have programs that are going to draw in those young to, teenagers. So what do you, I mean, that's a great example, what you just brought up. Is that the priority? I mean, you've only got so much funding to go around, and you have to set your priorities and figure out what you want to do. The primary focus, as I see it right now, is on the younger end of the spectrum to try to give guidance to the young folks as they're growing up. If we wanted to expand that to the teenagers, I think that's a fantastic idea. The problem is it's not cheap, and it takes people.
I think it takes a special place, to be quite honest, and I think people too, but I don't think you need a lot of people. I think that what
We'd love
was
a
great
place.
about the Chill Out Center
Yeah.
was that, and it was a small place, so it didn't have to be huge. I mean, I would ideally think it could be bigger. But it
Well, they were paying
was a
rent on
place
that
where you
space, right?
checked in.
Is it at the mall?
Yeah, it was a place where you checked in with somebody that you knew, if you were a returning person, and that you went in, and this was a place that, had one entrance, right? And there was only really one adult in there, and there were just teens who were, doing all the logistics. So it was a self-run place with an adult at the check-in, check-out counter. And I saw a place, I told Maggie about it, and I know that we don't have a place like this, but Alex's place, and this is a young person who died, and this was in Martha's Vineyard. And her parents started a foundation, and they built this. It's like going to a teen pub kind of place, so that size. But, it was with a juice bar, and you had a chess table, and you had a TV, and you had comfy seats. Downstairs, they had improv, they had a little stage. So, people who got creative could go down there and do things, and we did see a show when we were there. I mean, it was just this little place that was like a den, and that's what they want. They want to, be in a place where they feel safe. I think they do want to feel safe, but where they are not observed, and they're not told, okay, now we're going to do this, and now we're going to do this. They want to really be able to run it themselves, and I really think it doesn't take a lot. And as we saw at the mall, a lot of donations came in, and people were going. So, and it wasn't the best place. It was, had these bright fluorescent lights, right? But, the art, the teens had done it at the high school. They brought it over. I mean, everything was done by the teens. The whole, just the philosophy behind it was really beautiful. And anyway, I wanted to put that out there, and because you're on the committee.
That's very cool, and I think that's wonderful. The question is, how do we get there?
Right.
Right. Well, maybe we can task the Parks and Rec Committee to really do some focusing on some special programming for teens.
Absolutely.
I think we're missing. I think we're really
Absolutely.
lacking.
Holly would be a much better person to answer that than me.
Well, in some ways, it sounds like there's a place in the library,
Right.
for tweens, but maybe.
And the teens upstairs
And the
above
teens
the
are upstairs,
auditorium.
Well, I think we have to keep it in mind when we develop this indoor space,
Yeah.
what might be appealing
Yeah.
as well. And that's not gonna just be for evening adult basketball and older folks, or older folks pickleball, et cetera. We certainly can program and plan, so that whatever space we create has the ability to, after school especially, have programs for teens. There's absolutely no reason why that can't work.
But that's one reason why the site that's closer to city center potentially make more sense.
Absolutely.
So we gotta really
We do.
look at the whole picture.
Walking distance is a beautiful thing.
Well,
It really is.
we're gonna try not to waste too much time before we figure it out and get going.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. That'd be really
Okay,
good.
or we have two spots. We have one spot.
All right, so.
Two is good.
If
I like
there's
two.
no more questions,
One step at a time.
for George, thank you very much.
It's my pleasure.
Service
Thank
and your
you.
interest.
Take a
We
place
appreciate
at
it.
Alex's place in Oak Bluffs.
Martha's Vineyard? Martha's
Oh,
Vineyard.
Bluffs, Martha's
And in
Vineyard.
Bay Haven, they had a student community center type thing with similar stuff in the basement and so.
Yeah, didn't they do that in the basement of Memorial Auditorium?
They did.
They had, 5.
Yeah, they had a lot of improv, they had a lot of theater and
Yeah.
music and, yeah.
429 Main?
Yes, 429.
Where was this and what?
It's
In
that-
Burlington,
the-
down at
the
the
southernmost
bottom of
door
the,
of the auditorium.
Yeah.
Memorial Auditorium.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They did a lot of good stuff.
Right.
Okay, we are gonna take a 5-minute break. So we're in recess for 5 minutes. Okay, so I would like to call us back into action here and reconvene the South Burlington City Council meeting of Monday, August 20th, 2018. So we will go back up to, let me see, item 9, announcements in the city manager's report. So who has a little quick, short announcement? Nobody?
I went to 2 meetings last week. Here.
Okay.
I just went to our rink board meeting, and that's what tossed the possibility of that as a site for indoor recreation and to play.
Great. Tom? No, you were at the ribbon cutting.
Yeah, I missed the ribbon
Oh,
cutting.
and I did that too.
4 of us were at the ribbon
Yeah,
cutting.
that was really neat.
Which was a wonderful
I wish I could've gone.
event.
Great.
There was a slew of people. I was startled
Lots and lots of
by
kids.
how many people.
Yeah.
And of course, one woman did say to me, well, you haven't done anything about the parking. And I said, well, we're not going to have a ribbon cutting every day. And I think most people are going to be walkers to this park, either from city center or your neighborhood. I can't imagine as many cars as were there
No.
on Wednesday were going to be a normal occurrence. I mean, I could be wrong, but.
If you park at Healthy Living, can you sneak across the bridge? Is there a path to get there? That one, you know?
No.
No?
I did work a 15-and-a-half-hour day at the polls, so that was a long day.
There you go.
You came in suit and tie. And that horrible,
I worked
muggy.
at 8.5 hours. Actually, I underestimated my
Right. I worked the polls as well and went to the 2 meetings. Megan, you went to ribbon cutting and the 2 meetings and you worked the polls. So we've done our civic duty this week.
Oh.
There you go.
Or last week. It was busy. City managers report.
I got back from vacation, so I haven't much to report on.
You had a great time
I had a
though.
wonderful,
Where'd you go?
absolutely outstanding in Alaska. Went to Alaska with my 2 girls and my wife and 2 girls, who are
Cruise?
adults now, and so
Cruise?
part cruise, part tour.
Yeah. You leave from
Animals,
Vancouver?
Denali, huh?
Did you leave from Vancouver?
I came back to Vancouver.
Came in.
Yeah, yeah, it was great. It was great. Great time.
Cool.
I did put a question out to you through Tom about the update on the grant for the community outreach program.
From
Yep,
That
yep.
was July, yeah.
We received it.
We did, yeah, the $80,000 from the
Right.
Community Health Improvement Program. In fact, I did go to a Community Health Improvement Program annual meeting last week, so I did do something last week. Yes, we did get the grant, or the Howard Center got the grant.
Okay, and how is it being distributed?
Undecided at this moment. The steering committee is looking at the potential for training for police officers to help fill the gap on the night and weekends for part of it. But they're still working on a plan.
Have you gotten any feedback from the other communities? I mean, you know, you look at the numbers and South Burlington needs this. We're using it. And we have our person, but, you know, Williston and well, no, I guess it's just Williston that doesn't seem to have too many issues at this point. I don't know whether it's communication or people don't know or whatever, but,
All I know
do
is,
you think they'll pull out and say, ooh, this really isn't worth the money?
no, we had managers meeting last week. The issue came up and everybody, and Rick was there, And we just kind of went around the table, and people are very supportive of the program.
Okay.
So I think they're hearing from their police officers and their chiefs and all of that.
Shelburne has a new interim manager?
Yes, Lee Chrome. Yep.
How long is that going to be?
Interim? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. He was at our meeting last week. I didn't ask.
Okay. Any other
I think
questions?
they're happy.
I know you would like some of it to go back to us, or to offset, you know, our
Well,
sort of
interesting.
disproportionate contribution.
Interesting, because of the way the agreement was written, we took the risk of filling the gap for the fiscal 18 year. Because the state's money that came in, the other 5 communities put in, small amount, we paid nothing. So we didn't pay anything in fiscal 18 because the agreement was we would pay the balance. Because the state appropriation in budget adjustment was such, it was high enough, the contribution from the other communities paid for it all. So we ended up paying nothing in fiscal 18. So the program was really only up for, as Trevor indicated, 2 months, but staff were hired and in March. So going into the fiscal 19 year, we can talk to Howard about getting some back, maybe 20. We have found that we can use our
federal drug forfeiture money.
Federal drug forfeiture.
But we're able to use 20,000 out of that fund.
And we didn't use 20 in fiscal 18, right?
Right.
So we've got 40 to put in for fiscal 19. That would leave us with 20 grand or 40 if we didn't get anything from the grant.
Where does that money come from?
Drug forfeiture money goes through the DEA and back to the jurisdiction that supported the
percentage of it.
The percentage of it goes back to the jurisdiction that supported the
drug
investigation.
Because we're still trying to recruit police officers, right?
Yes, we have 2. As I understand, there's 2 that are enrolled in the academy right now that are promised to us, or we're sending them away.
And 2 are lined up for February. And there's a couple of other things
We have
going on.
1 transfer in place right now.
So then thinking ahead about how this is going to be financed. And you start budget talks next month? So
We're still good for 9. I mean, I still feel good about where we are for 19. I mean, by the time we have people on board. But when we start talking about the budget for 20, we'll need to determine what amount, we feel comfortable.
So the plan was that we would look at statistics as they came in, like we got tonight. And by the time we start the budget for fiscal 20, we'll all have a better idea of what the demand is for service, and the amount needed from the communities will be adjusted according to the demand, the call volume. And so we'll be doing that probably in October. We'll be meeting with the
So we're at 30% now, so unless something changes, that will probably.
30% of, so the
Might-
communities are on the hook for half, the state for half. Right now, the budget for the program is $320,000, plus we have the grant. So. But I think what you heard from the chiefs tonight is there's a lot of time during the day and on the weekends where we have no coverage. And so some of the grant might be used to support weekend and nighttime coverage, either through overtime for the current staff or hiring half or more of an additional counselor. So I want to leave that door open.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I think if it proves effective and is helpful, then that's a reasonable door to keep open anyway. Okay, so your report? Oh, no, that's, you
That was
have,
it.
sorry, blah, blah, blah. Okay, consent agenda. We have the signed disbursements,
I
so.
move that they approve the disbursements.
Second.
Any discussion? All, if not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
so we pass the signed disbursements. Move down to item 12, council's reports from committee assignments. Were there any? I have a question for you, though. I have a, and you can email me, but I have a airport commission meeting Wednesday, I think, yeah. So there's a little slot for South Burlington issues every time. And I guess I'm opening this up to the council. If there are specific issues that you would like me to raise, I'd be happy to. I mean, I report on some of the stuff we talk about, but
If the airport was in Burlington, how would the airport find space on the acquired property for a dog park? That's what I would ask at that committee. I would just be curious, if we were to put it back to the airport, if you truly want to get a dog park on this property, how could you make it happen?
okay, I can follow that. We've talked about it, and I mean, some of it was that the dog park committee, or the community said no, so.
But the other space near where the old one was, closer to the road.
I guess because they say something about FAA and stuff like that.
The old space.
Press harder.
I think, yeah, I will raise that again, or I don't think they're against, you know, looking into that. It's just the one spot they found, the community said no, or at least 6 people said, so the dog park continues to be of interest.
I agree, yeah.
And I don't know if you would like to, Tom, present, I mean, I can ask them, we've never had a conversation about reorganization or regionalization.
I'd be happy to
The
present it.
I mean, the commission, I mean, on the one hand, we have no clout really, but we could have the conversation if that's something you would want.
I would be happy
If
to.
the council would want that push.
I just don't think it'd be
I don't know.
fruitful because they have entrenched interests. So I think the real path is through the legislature, but I'd be happy to chat with the airport commission if this council
Okay.
wanted to.
Haven't, okay. Any other pressing issues? The moment?
We lost the revenue on the fuel sales, was that, remember that?
Yeah, the sales tax?
Yeah.
I need to check with the Agency of Transportation as to how that finally got worked out.
Okay, just curious.
No, thanks for reminding me
Okay.
of that. I was gonna call after the session ended.
Okay.
I think it may have gotten put back in.
I will say this, on the previous point, David Kaufman is well versed in that topic, and if he wanted to re-enter these discussions, if he wanted to engage with the airport commission to talk about how to strengthen their role over the governance of the airport, I'd certainly encourage that.
Well, I mean, that was over 30 years ago.
You have your fingers to count that.
Yeah, I know. I can, at some point, but I need a primer in order to get 100% back up to speed. But on what particular topics? Not just dog parks.
No, governance is what it
I mean,
said.
the overall governance?
Yeah,
I mean, the regional?
yeah.
Well,
Or even,
that's gone nowhere multiple times now.
But if you don't succeed.
well, we've some, a new board, we've become a new board. member. But again, I mean, I just,
Well, the other communities, who bought in with us, just Winooski?
mhm.
So, if everybody was on board, it'd be wonderful.
Know anybody in Williston?
Yeah.
I mean,
I did catch Dick Mazza at the CCRPC, and he seemed very receptive to continuing this conversation. He wanted to give some time for the mayor and for Jean to work through some of our concerns, but I think there's a lot of merit to this discussion, and I'm going to keep talking about it till I'm blue in the face.
no, I think there is merit to the discussion, because I think it would be a better airport if it was regionally managed.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've thought that for 30, 35, 40 years now. Amazingly. Which I wouldn't have realized unless you had pointed it out.
Yeah, you're older than you think, dude.
I don't,
Well,
so,
there are some other airport meetings scheduled, let's see.
well, maybe
Is
at
that
some
next
point we'll
week?
go to the
Yeah.
airport.
Those are next week.
I got
Next
one.
week, there's 2 sound meetings, 2 different sound meetings. Or one is regional, they're planned. I think
Yeah.
there's an airport sounds committee meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning. And then on Tuesday, and then on the 29th on Wednesday. Which meeting is that?
I still have sounds committee.
Yeah, but there's 2 different sounds
One's-
committees.
One's on sound issues and one I think is on planning,
Yes,
master planning,
master planning.
which they're updating.
Well, I will let you know when those are.
But Tom,
Get it
nothing until
clarified,
after
which
the
is
first couple
which.
of weeks of school. I mean, it's.
If there are any updates on the construction, I mean, we're always
It's not like we're in a big
eager
hurry.
to have information.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
residents
Probably not
really
going very
want
far,
to-
very fast.
Right.
Avenger in a month or two.
And they did have that
Well,
emergency
3 weeks.
exercise, which went very well.
Yeah, I heard
Yeah,
that. From residents, I didn't
Yeah.
get to hear anything myself.
so that went well. And I think they did a good job in letting the public know.
So 7 months from now, the
Yeah.
last F-16 leaves, and 6 months after that, the first F-35 arrives.
We go 6 months with none?
Right,
Supposedly 6 months without any
yeah,
fighter jets, you know, I mean, that are based here, you know,
Right.
so. Time's flying.
silence is golden.
Time's flying. Was that's a pun or what?
Yeah.
It's just another one,
It is.
just like,
Okay, let's move right along. Update on JC Dog Park fence removal.
The fence is down,
Why do
posts
we,
are coming up.
why do we need an update on that? That makes no sense at all.
Well, it was there a
Oh, yeah,
couple
and you
days
take it out,
ago.
it's part of the city's, it's part of the public works job, and we don't need to hear
I
about
know,
it.
but people
People
have
have been
asked about it.
Yeah.
When is it coming down? Yeah.
so did they pull the poles too?
They're pulling the poles.
Great.
Good,
Did they
But
have
the fence is completely down. It was as of 2:30 this
that's
afternoon.
being stored somewhere, right?
Okay.
And you got, okay, you're keeping it. You keeping the poles too?
Such that we can keep them from being damaged when they're pulled up.
Yeah,
Because they've
they
got
got-
cement, you know,
I'm not
bolts
sure.
on the bottom.
So I think some do, some don't, I think.
Can you knock the
The
cement?
ones for the gates, I think they cement.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
not easily.
Really? I don't know.
I didn't ask.
Okay,
I just told.
Okay, so item
Okay, good,
14.
thank you.
Thank you. Possible executive session to consider appointments to boards, commissions, and committees.
Ask.
Are we, you know, we didn't hear from 5 people tonight. Are we ready to
Four to five again.
act
We're
on
ranked up.
some?
what's the difference between 14 and 15?
Economic
Well,
development.
we
Right.
figure-
So before we actually have that conversation, can we just flip down to other business for just a moment?
Yeah.
And I just would like to recognize Judy Cairns and her new role at the other paper. She's changing her role, as you all know. You sold it or sold the paper to a consortium. And I just, on, I think, behalf of the entire council, but definitely from my perspective, I want to really thank you for developing and creating what I think is a really excellent local paper. I think your coverage on the many topics, since I certainly have been on the council, some of which were really difficult, complicated, and important. The paper you succeeded in really providing very fair coverage, and, you know, hats off to you, Judy. I think you've been really wonderful for our committee, our community, so that they really have the information, if they choose to read it and think about it, and come here and follow up or whatever, but you've really given them a remarkable opportunity to be informed voters, and that's what journalism is all about, and it's alive and well, I think, in South Burlington, and I want to publicly thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
It's been,
I don't think
it's
we
been
had a
my
motion
privilege
by
really
this.
to connect the dots and to do that for 10 years. And it's with a great staff and a lot of loyalty from those people who really think so much of South Burlington and a sense of community. And I have every reason to believe that that will continue in the same way.
Hope so. You've set a high bar.
Thank you.
No, really, you have. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Since I knew you wouldn't be here after
I might
our
still be back
executive session.
on some random Monday evenings. You never can tell.
Well, we hope so. You still live here and
I
vote
do.
here, so.
Thank you.
So do we need, we should do an executive session to do as much as we can on the appointments?
Sure. I move the council enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing appointments to South Burlington boards, commissions, and committees. And I intend to go into executive session.
I'll second that.
Okay.
I did have a question for other business though.
Okay.
Sorry. But, have we started to start scheduling for a retreat or?
You know, I have not done that, and it's on my list of to-dos.
Okay. And, okay, and then we also.
It's not
we all-
forgotten.
Yeah. And we also filled out some evaluations. I was just curious if you were gonna hear back about that.
We still have to complete that, yep.
Okay,
Summer got away,
all right,
but it's not forgotten, it just hasn't been completed.
okay.
So we'll press on with that. So we have a motion to move into executive session. It's been seconded. All in favor, say aye.